Hello YouTube, it's Ian here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we're going to be doing another manga review. Today we're going to be looking at Origin by Boichi. This is the full completed series, 1 through 10. There is technically an extra chapter that is not collected in this story, but I read it via scans because this manga is in Spanish, and I read Spanish. However, sometimes the way the sentences are formulated in Spanish doesn't really make sense to me, so I have to go online and check them. And this time I decided not to use Google Translate, but rather just go and check the scans for the story in order to see how other people translated it into English, and that allowed me to see that there was an extra chapter. So yeah, this is written by Boichi, as you guys can tell right there, and this is published by Panini Manga in Mexico, as you guys can see right here at the bottom of the books. And the demographic is seinen. I can't remember what magazine this was in, but I'm pretty sure it was a Shogakukan magazine. But it might have not been. It might have actually been a Shueisha magazine, because you know, Boichi works for Shonen Jump now, so that kind of makes sense. And the genres here are science fiction, robotics, and action. This is mostly a robot story. However, it does have a lot of action in it, because it's basically a robot-on-robot kind of fight. And this is sci-fi in the more classical sense. It kind of deals with the philosophical ideas of like what it means to be alive, and what it means to live, and what it means to, you know, exist and stuff like that. And it also kind of has a lot of philosophical, metaphysical kind of stuff here near the end of the story. And it's pretty interesting. I actually liked it quite a lot. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's pretty old school in the science fiction realm. However, it does have a very modern veneer to it. It's very, it reminds me a lot of like Isaac Asimov type robot stories, but it is more or less a Terminator action style movie, or like kind of action style story, like the Terminator movie, if that makes sense. And it's pretty cool. I actually really liked it. However, it doesn't seem to be very like well known and popular outside of Japan and Hispanic countries. I don't know why. I think it's because Boichi is not that great at ending his stories. You know, famously, Sunken Rock is not the best story ending, but I mean, I don't know. I thought it was good. This one was a little rushed, but overall, I thought it was quite good. So yeah, this does not have an adaptation for the reasons that I just kind of stated above, which I guess kind of makes sense, but I really wish that there was an adaptation. I think it would be really cool. And I actually think it would do really well as a live action movie, because it would be very similar to stuff like Terminator and Ex Machina and stuff like that. And I think it would do really well. It also has a very kind of cyberpunk aesthetic to it. So that's actually really useful, because it's kind of a popular style of movies right now. So yeah, so the premise is basically that our character Origin, which is the title of the movie of the series, and also the name of the character, although he goes by Jin Tanaka, because he exists, he's a robot, and he is trying to blend in with humans, because he is trying to follow this last edict, I guess, that his father left him when he died, which was to live properly. In Spanish, it's actually to live as it's intended, which I guess means live properly. And because he's a robot, he can't really reason what that means. And I think that it's also a thing that is actually difficult to reason out. It's not easy to understand, even with like a flexible outlook on life like humans do, which is actually really useful, because as he's trying to figure out what this means, he's going through life, and he has decided that living properly means to live like a human. And so he is trying to eventually gain consciousness, because that was one of the things his father wanted him to do. And what he ends up doing is working for a robotics company. And while he's doing this, he also realizes that he has robotic siblings that he helped his father create, and that they're out stalking humans and killing them and doing stuff that he doesn't think fits the live properly edict that his father left him. And so he is now in direct conflict with his siblings. And so we see him battle them, but ultimately battle his brother Ken, Masamune, I think is his proper name. who is the first robot to gain human consciousness or consciousness of some degree. And so they're in direct opposition, right? So he basically has to fight them as he tries to blend in. And so it's actually a very, very cool story. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. The art style is awesome, of course. And, you know, there's a lot of cool stuff happening in this story. So, yeah, the plot line, I think, is great. It's clear and mostly well-developed and has a very easy to understand through line up until, like, the last 2 or 3 chapters, where it kind of devolves, like very many sci-fi stories, into this, like, vaguely fantastical feeling kind of idea, because, you know, that's just kind of what happens. If you've ever seen Interstellar or, what was the other one? I don't know, like Interstellar and like anything that deals with stuff that becomes like higher level than humanly possible eventually turns into this like very fantasy looking and very fantasy feeling kind of idea. And so that's kind of where it kind of loses itself, because most of it was actually very grounded sci-fi. But it's like I said, it's mostly well developed with a clear through line. It's very simplistic and very understandable. It's not very difficult. It's very classic robot wants to gain consciousness type of story. It's basically Pinocchio, but like Frankenstein, but also like Terminator. So it's very, very cool. It has a lot of amalgamations of a lot of different things, and it's very, very interesting. So origin exists. That's the initial premise, and he's blending into society. He decides to work for a robotics company who were basically in direct opposition with his father, his creator, basically. And he struggles with money, because that is a normal person thing to do. And he finds out that his siblings are killing humans, and he wants to send a message to them. So he confronts one of them. They have a battle. This is the first chapter, so it's not any spoilers. And he kills them. It was a feminine-looking robot, so it was a her, and their name was Da. And so he killed Da. And he sent the message to his siblings, and they calculated the results, and they were like, yes, we should stop fighting him because it's not necessary to do so. But they are ruled by another robot who is also a sibling of Origin / Jin and all of these other robots, who happens to have consciousness, whose name is Ken or Masamune. And so he tells them, no, we have to fight him, and we have to be better than him. And so they begin this process of developing their brain activity, because their brains are less developed than Jin's. And so Jin decides to develop his hardware, his exoskeleton, his like stuff, right? His manipulations, like the way he can manipulate the world around him. And so there's this kind of arms race between the two of them that then develops into something else, as some of these robots choose to do different things and different choices in order to kind of achieve their end goal. And it's very, very cool. And so this existence and this race against time and his siblings, and then this development into his consciousness, leads to this very awesome set of battles and a lot of human drama between a lot of the characters that work with Jin and Jin himself. And so it's very, very cool. And I think the best part of the story is the stuff like between volumes 4 and 8. I think that is the coolest part of the story, but the whole thing is actually really, really great. So yeah, I don't really want to jump into any specific spoilers, but the ending does devolve into that kind of like fantasy-esque kind of feel to it, but it doesn't really like stop being scientific. It kind of still makes sense within the confines of like what is being said. And it's good. However, I do think that a lot of people would say that it's rushed, and I definitely agree with that. It does feel like there could have been at least 5 more chapters, and Boichi was just like, no, I gotta do this quickly, let's move on. And I'm not exactly sure why, because when this was serializing, he was also serializing Dr. Stone, but this finished about 3 years before Dr. Stone did. So I'm not sure if Boichi was just like, okay, I need to rush this so I can continue to work fully on Dr. Stone, or if it was a kind of situation of like, there's no point in spacing it out, or, you know, it wasn't being as popular in the magazine as the editors wanted, and so he was told to wrap it up or what. But I do think the last 2 or 3 chapters are definitely faster paced and everything else, but I think that the story pacing is actually quite good, and we get to see in a lot of the author notes that Boichi has put a lot of thought into this story. I think he said he started developing it in 2005, and he only now, like in 2016 is when he started serializing it, so he had about 10 years to develop a story, and he had talked about how it was part of a larger story that he wanted to tell in a few parts, and he kind of made it seem like there was going to be like 3 parts to the story, like 3 separate series that would combine into one. And this is technically a spiritual successor of Sunken Rock. So I guess Sunken Rock was part 1, this one's part 2, and then there's something else that has to be part 3. But it doesn't seem like that's the case, because in one of the later author's notes, he actually kind of doesn't backpedal, but he kind of like says that he has managed to convey the ideas that he wanted to in the parts of the story, and so that it is more or less finished. However, the author's note of volume 9 makes it seem like there's a lot more happening, but only 1 volume after that. So I do think that there was some outside pressure that made him finish the story faster, but I don't think he did a bad job of it. So I don't know, that's very much a personal preference thing. I think that it worked, and it kind of makes sense. You know, it fits with a lot of other sci-fi, so it doesn't really seem all that difficult to me. I actually really enjoyed the ending. So yeah, like it's not the best, but like it was pretty good, so it made sense to me. I didn't really find it to be bad. So yeah, in terms of characters, I think this is where it really shines, because this is a story of gaining consciousness, of becoming something akin to human. And so there's a lot of drama and a lot of like questioning and a lot of like introspection through characters about what it means to be alive. And so we follow Origin, or Jin, whichever way you want to call him. Tanaka, I think, his last name is Tanaka and his name is Jin, but he is Origin, actually. That's his designation, because he's a prototype for all of his sibling robots. So he exists, and he has very like human style expressions and thoughts, but this is due to the fact that he has a specific language processing unit that is based on a specific type of rationale when speaking, and so he kind of does have the ability to pass off as a human, but he doesn't actually think like one. He just manages to convey his ideas like one, right? And so he does everything through this lens of calculating it to be what a human would do. And he kind of does this just because he thinks that's what he's supposed to do, because he took his father's last words as his like prime directive, right? And eventually he does kind of develop consciousness. That is the major part of the story. So it's not a spoiler. It's like the point of the story, right? So it's very interesting that once he does, he looks back at everything he did, and it's very interesting. Like there's a lot of stuff there with him, and it's very interesting just the way that he exists before and after, and I thought it was great. I think Boichi really knows a lot about this sci-fi stuff, so I like that a lot. I mean, Boichi did go to university to study physics so he could make sci-fi manga, so I don't know, I think he's very dedicated. Then we have a bunch of people that work with him in the AEE robotics company, like Che Chao Zheng, I think is his name. In Spanish, it was Che Chan Chong, which I thought was like a racial, like a joke, like a racist joke, but apparently it's not. It's actually a like Korean-esque name, but it was translated into Spanish in a way that sounded like shitty, but it wasn't supposed to be that way. But I think his name in English should be Cho Cheng Xiang. So there you go. And then we have an Italian female character named Laura Fermi, who happens to be his direct boss. And then we have a few other people that work with him. The most important one being Hirose Mei, who is like the main female character, basically. And she happens to be some sort of like romantic interest to an extent. And it's very good. I really like these characters a lot. Not Che so much specifically, but Laura Fermi and Hirose are very interesting. They show 2 very different sides of femininity that then clash with Origin's kind of like neutral masculine kind of vibe. And so through them, he kind of learns a lot about interactions with humans and this idea of like connections with humans. And then Laura and Che specifically teach him some stuff. And then with Hirose, he kind of just learns a lot about himself. And I think that that's really interesting. I like that a lot. And then we have all of Jin's siblings. We have San, who goes by Arya when she develops like a sense of self. Then we have Gon, who is a guy that basically looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he is like one of these robots that decided that maintaining the human aspect that was given to them is not actually useful. And so he gives that up into becoming this monstrous kind of looking thing. Then we have Da, who was the first robot that we saw. And she was very unimportant after the first few chapters. Then we have Shin Khan, who happens to look like Jin's father. And so there's a lot of very interesting stuff with him specifically. And then we have Ken and Ken slash Masamune, who is ultimately the villain in Jin's story. And then we have Y, or I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's supposed to be like a Greek letter. I wasn't really sure. Who is this other robotic entity that is a very advanced AI. She's basically like Ultron, but like a cute anime girl. And it's a very interesting character, but it wasn't really like a very deep character. It was just there as like a separate third party to Jin and Masamune's kind of like second, like other parties. And I thought it was an interesting character, but it didn't really do too much. And then we have two other characters. We have Miyuki Hirosue, who is Hirosui, who is the leader of the AEE, and she comes in direct conflict with Jin at one point, but she is also a very close friend to his father, Hije Tanaka, and it's very interesting. I really enjoy the web of characters that exist here, and the way that everything works is very, very cool. In terms of world building, I think it's great. However, it is very science heavy, so if you're not really interested in that type of stuff, if you don't enjoy technobabble, and honestly, it's not even technobabble, because mostly technobabble is more like buzzwords and key phrases that help you understand that this is a scientific thing. In most of the cases, when it devolves into technobabble, it's actual scientific, like realistic things that Boichi is telling you in order to make this robot seem real. And so, if you don't like that type of stuff, you probably won't enjoy this. But the world building is great. There's so much of it, and there's these pages here at the back where Boichi really teaches you about how he designed the things that he did. And I think it's really, really cool. So, yeah, like here, he teaches you why he created this special car and these weapons and these little cell phone AI things. And it's very, very cool. Like, the world building is actually really, really intense and very specific and very cool. And a lot of it is very scientific. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's realistic, because it is like real science taken to an extreme that is not possible currently, but it is realistic enough. It is based on real science, so it is science fiction, but it is definitely a hard sci-fi. It is not very light and fluffy sci-fi, at least until the end. Like you would think, like it's not very Star Warsy, because Star Wars is very light sci-fi. It is mostly fantasy, more or less. And like Terminator is a lot more hard sci-fi. So it would be more in the Terminator side of things than the Star Wars side of things for the majority of the story. And it's very, very cool. It's very, very interesting. And it's very nice. I just really, really enjoy the world building a lot. And there's also a lot of like historical changes. So the story takes place in 2048, which is, 20 years from now. And throughout these 20 years, there's been an immense cyberpunk style development, and so there's this company, the AEE, that runs everything basically, and it's very, very interesting. There's this giant railway that connects Europe to Asia, and it goes from the UK to Japan, and it helps basically allow these mega corporations to exist, and it's very, very interesting. I like it a lot. I think the world building was really well done. And in terms of artwork, of course, we have a shit ton of awesome artwork, because Boichi excels at this type of stuff. We have very cool action scenes like this, and then we have very interesting, just like well, I can't show you this one, give me a second. Very cool, just like ridiculous, like why would you focus on a sword kind of things, but also just a lot of very human expressions, very interesting expressions that Boichi develops. And of course, a lot of fan service. But honestly, some of my favorite scenes aren't even like the fan servicey ones, because I do like those, but they're not necessarily my favorite, because Boichi really excels at stuff like this. Let me show you. Let me see if I can find it. I found it earlier. Stuff like this, which just has so much emotion and so much like development, especially now that I finished the series and I go back and look at these images and I'm like, damn, man, this is so like harsh, and it really kills you, man. It's like, oh man, because this little robot that he makes, the original body of Origin, is so cute and so adorable, and so it really does manage to convey these very like emotional moments, even though it's very much just a little robot. And then, of course, the human characters have a lot of expressions as well. So, yeah, the art style is awesome. I love Boichi so much. There are some slight problems with his anatomy sometimes. Like, he does this thing where he, like, makes characters' necks, like, really long. And usually it doesn't matter. On the guys, it doesn't look too bad. But on the women, it looks really harsh because it's like their heads and then their necks are the same length. And for some reason, Boichi likes to draw people with their neck forward. And that looks really bad. But that's the only real issue with Boichi's anatomy that I find. Everything else about his drawings is like top tier. The mechanical design of all of the robotics and all of the non-human aspects that he made are badass. The human expressions are amazing. Besides that neck thing, everything else about the bodies that he draws are awesome and amazing. And there's just so much about the style that is so good. Of course, Boichi is a very fan service heavy mangaka, so if you don't like fan service, you're not going to like this. However, I would argue that sci-fi has always had a lot of fan service. Even the most hardcore fiction stories or science fiction stories also have an element of sexuality to them, because most of them are about exploring humanity. And one of the major driving factors of humans is the desire to reproduce, and so there's always this element of like sexuality to the best sci-fi stories, and so I wouldn't really say that it's really any different in this case. However, there's a lot of gratuitous titties and ass and all of this type of stuff for both the male and female characters. So if you don't like that type of stuff, don't read this, because from the very get-go you see a lot of it. So yeah, there's also a lot of like body horror elements of the story. So there's that, because these robots, it's very similar to Terminator in that sense. You know, like his skin comes off, and so you see this like ugly skeleton and these like innards, and it's very cool. I liked it a lot. So yeah, the rating is a 5 out of 5. There is definitely problems with the series. Some of the fan service is very unnecessary. The ending does feel a bit fast. However, everything else about the story is perfect, and I enjoyed this story so much while I was reading it, so I gotta give this a 5 out of 5. It'll probably go on my top 10 manga that I've read this year list, because it is just so cool. I really enjoyed it. This is like top tier science fiction for me. This is exactly what I like when I see science fiction. Awesome, badass action scenes, awesome, very interesting metaphysical and philosophical debates and kind of processes, and also a lot of like human sexuality type of stuff. Like I really enjoy that type of stuff in these types of stories, and it's also one of the reasons why I really like Heart Gear as well. I think Heart Gear and Origin are very similar in that sense. However, they do focus on slightly different things. This one is about the actualization of a consciousness, of Origin's consciousness, and Heart Gear is more about the understanding of what it means to be alive, and they're slightly different. They might be similar, but they're different enough in my opinion. And so this is a 5 out of 5. I thought it was great. It was wonderful. I definitely recommend it if you like other Boichi style works. And if you like sci-fi in general, I think Origin is a great story. If you like Heart Gear, you probably will like Origin as well, even if it's slightly different. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys later.